introduction. I'm Markus Pfänder. I'm working for a German group of enterprises, and it's a very, very international company with a lot of presence all over the world in 60 countries, and one very important office also here in Chile. And I'm within this group of companies. I'm responsible for a new enterprise that we formed that concentrates on decentralized energy and energy efficiency. Normally, Ferrostaal has already had a long history in energy, over 30 years building power plants all over the world. And we were looking for new opportunities in the energy sector, and we saw these opportunities in small companies, in small mines also, where the energy cost is very, very, very high, and we can compete with renewable energies already a few years ago, and now even more with energy costs of diesel having 25 cents or more. Renewables are already very, very, very attractive and also very economic. So now we are here in this discussion, and I think we have a very, very complete group. You already know most of the participants. Tom being managing director of NiStar, of one of the mining companies. Another managing director of a mining company which can give us the view of the directives of a company on how they look on energy supply and the challenges that we have with energy supply. And we also have Pablo, who joined us. You don't know him. He's director of Medio Ambiente ambient and communities, right? That was it. And he's located in the north of Chile in a mine there, working, and he brings a lot of experience in consulting for ambient issues and also with communities. We also should have Jose with us, I think, who wanted to join us. Okay, so but we are a very international group. So I started with English, but I think we later switch a moment to Spanish in order to talk with you about some of the issues that you wanted to mention, with especially focus on issues related to communities and also to ambient conditions that hybrid plants have. So, but I want to start maybe with a very, very general view from a general manager perspective on what the challenges of an isolated mine are related to energy and also fuel supply. So, and how you deal with that. Tom, could you answer that question?
Yep. Is that okay? Yeah, El Toqui, the closest port that we have is in Puerto Chacabuco. All of our fuel is brought into that facility, and then we truck it to site. And we truck probably 5 or 6 trucks a week at 25,000 liters per truck. And there's an environmental risk. We haven't had any issues with the truck transport or any accidents and any spills, which is good. But we also use the diesel for all of the mining equipment as well. With respect to the storage facilities that we have on site, for diesel, I think we're installing another 7,500 liters or 10,000 liter storage capacity. So our storage for energy is in the diesel storage. The river at the moment is running pretty well. I'm not sure if that's the real issue that we have, and the decision to install the third turbine was economic. Just because it was said in a couple of the other presentations earlier, who can predict what the price of oil is going to be? So anything that we can do for reducing our costs makes us that much more competitive. We're also looking at, we've got a tailings pond that's in closure right now. It has a huge surface area. We have to close it with the installation of a impermeable membrane on top of it, but we're investigating the use of installing solar panels across that wide expanse of free area for the sun. Although we don't get much sun, we're investigating that as an opportunity to increase even further renewables for the operation.
Yes, I was asking also a little bit more on logistics for the oil supply, because I think I understood from your company in the presentation it was one of the decisions or one of the decision points that you had a problem with logistics or something like that, that maybe jeopardized the energy supply, where maybe renewables can give a certain mitigation to such a problem. Do you want to maybe add something?
Yes. Yes, Tom mentioned that we're very similar to our Cerro Bay operation has very similar logistical issues in that it all comes through the port of Chacabuco, and then the main difference that we have is our petroleum, our diesel, has to be then barged across General Carrera, and you're very limited in your options there. So what you find there's one ferry, it's quite a big one, but that's also used for passengers as well. So what you find, you can't transport diesel or explosives at the same time as passengers are used. So we only get 1 day a week where we can bring our fuel across and our explosives. So big issue is wind, when there's high wind conditions, which will be good for the wind generation, but it's negative for barging. We can't ship across. And then you have regional issues. Several years ago there was large strikes in Aysén, and virtually the barge was stopped and the roads were closed. So then you need a very large stockpile of diesel on site. So we have over 500,000 litres of storage capacity on site to allow for those. So that's a large inventory that you're carrying of diesel as well.
If one of the questions was, can we operate on 100% renewable, in Toki's case, no. We need the diesel generation.
Yeah, yes, but I mean, on the storage, I don't know, you mentioned 500,000 liters you have on storage. How many days of operation is that?
Well, that's maybe 15 days.
Okay, so that's quite long. And is it the same more or less for you?
We have about 3 days.
3 days.
Yep.
So that means eventually, if there is a strike or something going on or whatever, you run out of power. And I understand that for a mining company, this is a huge amount of money that is in stake. So if you cannot produce several days, this is something very important finally also for your earnings, right?
Revenue generation for Toki at today's prices is about $250,000 a day. And this strike that Dominic is talking about occurred in Aysén, and it shut the operation down for a month and a half. I think it was in 2011 in Toki's case. So.
In our case, because of the storage, what we did, we stopped our processing plant because that was the largest consumer, and we kept underground mines running because we realised if we had the plant running, there would only be 15 days. But we could continue for the month and a half just with the mines operating because we have a excess capacity in the processing plant that you could catch up.
But I understand, I think for both of you, finally, the reasons why you decided to install some renewable energy was clearly economic. So as I mentioned earlier, I mean, with diesels, you probably have 25 plus cents per kilowatt hour, and bringing it down to 15 as in your case, or maybe something similar in your case as well, is a fair about money that you finally can save.
We're a bit over 25 cents at the moment. So another thing that we've done also, because you do see the petroleum price has dropped drastically over the last few months. When we were looking at Mandalay as a whole budgeting, what we saw is that actually petroleum costs were about 40% or 30 to 40% under what we budgeted. So, and we don't see that as being a long-term price. So we actually took out a future call on we calculated our whole petroleum production for 2015, and we locked in that price, the actual price from about 3 months ago for the all of 2015, which is another way. It gives you the stability for such a high petroleum user, and gives you a little bit of a stability for your operating costs for the following year.
So I'm going to switch a moment to Spanish. Pablo, hemos hablado de los beneficios económicos que al final tiene una integración de energías renovables en una mina aislada con operación con diésel. Ayer hemos hablado, vosotros tenéis una mina de cobre en el norte, donde estáis justo frente de la construcción, y estáis pensando también en introducir energías renovables en el suministro de energía. Tú, como especialista también en asuntos medioambientales, ¿ves algunos beneficios más que solamente económicos ahora, desde tu punto de vista de vuestra mina?
Tenía esa idea y después de estos 2 días, pero seguro que sí. Antes que nada, quería agradecer a Energy and Mind por la invitación, agradecerte, Marcus, por esta coordinación, y tanto a Tom como Dominic por las experiencias. Nuestro proyecto es un proyecto pequeño de mediana y pequeña minería, está ubicado en la 3ª región de Atacama. Se llama Sociedad Contractual Minera Berta y tiene dos polos, una parte de extracción, chancado y leach en Inca de Oro, a unos 15 kilómetros al oeste. Esto es la localidad de Diego de Almagro, en Chañaral. Y después se produce ahí un PLS que es transportado en camiones hacia la zona, una actividad que quedó fuera de servicio y de operación hace bastante tiempo, que es la minera Trinidad, la planta Nora que está ubicada ahí. Tanto lo que es la planta Nora para lo que es SX y electrowinning está conectada al sistema interconectado, o sea que ahí no es el problema al cual estamos analizando y viendo. Pero Berta es una actividad remota, es una actividad que está ubicada en un lugar donde no hay ninguna posibilidad de llegar con energía, entonces estamos hablando aproximadamente de 1,5 megas aproximadamente, con gran porcentaje en chancado, menos porcentaje en lixiviación y muy poco en lo que son servicios auxiliares y demás. Entonces yo encontraba en estas exposiciones anteriores una similitud importante, especialmente porque nuestro suministro de energía está dado por diésel. Y entonces, frente a lo que vos preguntabas, Marcus, que tiene que ver con los aspectos ambientales, estamos frente siempre a riesgos tecnológicos, con la probabilidad de ocurrencia y las consecuencias que se dan. Me imaginaba el tema del transporte en un recurso hídrico, que eso también tiene que ser bastante delicado y controlado con sus planes de contingencia y demás. Y por otro lado, los altos costos de llegar a lugares alejados. Lo que sí, después de estos 2 días y de estar hablando con muchos de ustedes, lo que vemos como totalmente atractivo es la posibilidad de hacer un sistema híbrido, pero especialmente con sistema fotovoltaico, especialmente porque le dan las condiciones de ecosistema en el lugar, donde podemos ver la gran diferencia que se da en la Patagonia, con las grandes posibilidades de direcciones y velocidades más continuas de viento. No es lo que nosotros tenemos allá, tenemos direcciones totalmente asimétricas y diferentes, y tenemos velocidades también muy diferentes, pero sí condiciones totalmente y excelentes para hacer sistemas fotovoltaicos. Así que de hecho, esta condición la tendremos en cuenta con todo nuestro equipo de trabajo y de ingeniería, porque nosotros no somos faena, somos un proyecto que tiene resolución de calificación ambiental ya para trabajar. Estamos haciendo todas las condiciones de permiso frente al Cernagiomín de lo que son los proyectos técnicos de rajo, botadero y planta, y estamos también con planes de cierre, y estamos muy próximos, ya prácticamente tenemos muy cerca del financiamiento y de la ingeniería, o sea que sobre el segundo semestre de este año ya estamos empezando a construir y operar.
Muy bien, gracias por tu punto de vista. Aparte de todos esos beneficios, seguramente que hay también algunos retos, ¿no? Retos también quizás medioambientales. De punto de vista de permisos y todo eso, ¿tú ves alguna problemática relacionada con introducir renovables en una minera?
No, yo lo que veía, y se ha estado hablando también en estos 2 días, es en primer lugar que en cuanto a las emisiones, que el SEA, el Servicio de Evaluación Ambiental de Chile, está siendo muy exigente en cuanto a la evaluación de las emisiones, Ahí hay un efecto totalmente y significativo favorable, el hecho de utilizar un sistema que sea fotovoltaico frente al sistema diésel, que tiene emisiones importantes, pero que no son significativas a las poblaciones alejadas. Puede ser una emisión importante, pero no es un problema de inmisión para la localidad cercana. Y ese es un tema interesante a tener presente. Por otro lado, lo que comentaba recién, el riesgo en cuanto al manejo, que tiene que ver con transporte, que tiene que ver con almacenamiento, que tiene que ver con derrames y todas esas cuestiones de diésel. Y por otro lado, como son grandes extensiones, especialmente en el lugar donde está ubicado el proyecto, que ya ha sido evaluado todo lo que es el polígono de evaluación ambiental, hay lugares seguramente que pueden ser totalmente aptos para la instalación de un sistema de paneles fotovoltaicos, y seguramente, como también se dijo, creo que el primer día, la Dirección de Monumentos Nacionales y de Patrimonio son muy exigentes en cuanto a recursos arqueológicos que se puedan llegar a tocar en la zona, y en cuanto a flora y fauna no hay ningún problema en esos lugares, a diferencia de lo que puede llegar a darse en el sur, donde veíamos en las fotos la importante variedad y especies de vegetación que hay.
We were talking a little bit, I think you understood, also about the permitting and process and so on. So from your presentation, I learned that it was quite a bit of time and work to get permits for your hydropower plant, while for a wind power plant, it fairly quick. I think it was 2 months and you had the permit. So there is a clear difference. I think for hydro it's quite complicated, while wind and solar, it looks quite easy to get the permits and quite fast to install finally.
Yeah, for the case of Toki, it was the water right. It was all to expand from 5.7 cubic meters per second to the 7.3. That was the delay. Environmental permitting, it wasn't anything associated with that. It was the right to the water. Okay. But on the wind farm, it was very, very quick.
Pablo.
Sí, quería también agregar que al tener una resolución de calificación ambiental y tener evaluadas las condiciones tanto arqueológicas como de vegetación, de flora del lugar, seguramente que para nuestro caso, si llegáramos a realizar un sistema híbrido con paneles fotovoltaicos, lo que hay que presentar en ese caso es una pertinencia, que es un informe donde directamente no se presentan las condiciones totalmente mejorables a las condiciones ambientales, y por lo que no se debe presentar una declaración de impacto ambiental para esa actividad.
Which is a clear benefit for... So coming now a little bit to the technical questions, the projects that you have constructed, well, in your case it's about 45, I think, right now, of a percent that you produce renewable. In your case, a little bit lower, and I think.
I think it gets up to around about 16 to 18%. It'll be when the wind is blowing.
Yeah. So I understand the integration, a part of the problem, the very specific problems that you had with the turbine was quite smooth, so you didn't have any problems with instability, because I understand from an industry point of view this is also a sort of concern where you say we need a certain stability of power, we don't want to handle continuous power cuts or frequency fluctuations and so on. Was that a concern, and how did you finally deal with it? Do you want to start, Dominic?
Definitely, it was a concern, and that's where the whole hybrid system comes into place. So we, at the Cerro Bayo operation, where there's quite a bit of flexibility with the amount of generating power you do have. The processing plant powerhouse has 6 megas, and then down at the mines, that's a further 4 megas. It was over dimension because the planning for the future when we could integrate a whole hybrid system. So we want to be able to have something that those 4 megawatts down at the mine could take out when the processing plant isn't operating, it could run everything at site as well. So all of the workshop, the pumps, everything else. And when the processing plant is started up, so with this whole hybrid system coming into place, then the minimum amount of generators from the older, less efficient processing plant would start up and supplement that. And then but having such a large capacity of generating power. If your wind is down, then that, or if the wind is too high or too low, then it does cover for that variance in alimentation, in feed of the actual wind generators. And at a future date, if we ever can put in a hydro system, of course, that adds to that. We always do need the backup and a larger backup. So, and just reiterating the point of Tom's that the issue was water rights. Going forward in Chile, the hydro is even though it's very efficient way of generating it, there's just a water rights complexity here in Chile now, and the issues surrounding it is almost making it unfeasible to some degree, which is it's disappointing because it could be it is a very efficient way of, and could really help with the energy needs of Chile. So we hope then moving forward, what we're talking about is quite small generators, it's quite small hydro plants that really don't have much impact anywhere. They're actually quite efficient. I can see the concerns with projects such as Hydrosen, etc., where you're closing whole rivers, but hydro plants are 1 to 2 megs. It's a shame that they are suffering as well as a result of this.
Yeah, for the generation of power from the hydro is very, very steady, and the generation of power from the genset's very, very steady. The only variable is the wind. And we've got excess capacity, as does Cerro Bayo, in diesel generation to manage that. And that's why we have to have operators there constantly monitoring the wind generation so he can react and bring gensets online or take gensets offline. That's the control.
And what actually happens, I mean, you mentioned that at a certain high wind speed you have to stop production because the turbine cannot handle the high wind speed anymore.
Correct.
And this is a sudden drop of power that you have in your grid. I mean, as long as you're prepared, I think it's not a problem, but does this affect somehow the stability of your grid?
No, it doesn't affect the stability of the equipment or anything like that. You just have to be mindful and watching. That's why we have control room operators available 24/7 just to watch that.
Now, we have been studying, I mentioned we were also looking on some mines and alternative energy supplies for isolated mines in Chile. And we saw the chance even to go up to 100% renewable production in power in one moment, not in terms of energy all over the year, but in good days produce 100% of power. Is this something that you would even consider, or are you still a little bit skeptic?
Definitely would consider it. We're actually in feasibility stage in northern Chile of the Challacoyo property. So we've definitely got our eyes open for what are the best options for being able to feed this mine. There's quite a grid line that passes relatively close to the mine, but nothing is certain when you're at this stage of the operation. So we've seen the success of Otoki. We've followed that quite closely, so we don't have any concerns about having renewable energy supplying and part of the energy to our mine. And if there's a future option for 100%, definitely we're on board. And mainly for a cost perspective too, as well. You always have to try and lower costs where you can, and that is huge part of our costs in Cerro Bayo. To a less extent, it will be in Challacoyo, but being a new project, obviously you can do anything going forward. So.
Same for us. The investment in renewables is preferred, provided we could get additional water rights. I would do that first before investing additional in the wind. But obviously it makes us that much more competitive because it keeps our operating costs lower. And so for sure, we would invest more in renewables. If we could be 100%, we would do it.
So I understand your experience with the integrating renewables directly in a isolated site has been very positive. So it resulted in a cost reduction and didn't really add significantly to complexity or whatever compared to the usual operations that you have ongoing on site.
We don't know yet. It's in construction, but hopefully, yes. Look, we're in quite a good situation that we're using the same company that our Toki have used, so hopefully they've ironed out all the problems, and we don't expect there to be any issues at all.
Yeah, the thing that drives us is available capital. As Dominic was saying, we have every year exploration program to find more reserves for the operation, and it's quite significant. So we balance that with doing the right things in terms of investing in our number one cost, which is energy. Energy costs are number one for us. So we need to keep the business going by exploration, and we need to keep the infrastructure up to where it needs to be so that we can keep competitive.
That's a good point that you bring up with capital availability. Nevertheless, I mean, you have two very different approaches finally in how contractually integrate renewables in your ongoing business. So, and you finally, nevertheless, also that capital is always short. You decided to buy the equipment and operate it yourself, while you preferred, Dominic, to go for a PPA solution. So can you explain a little bit the reasons why you finally decided not to look for a PPA and directly buy the equipment?
Yeah, it's a corporate structure that we have. The purchase of the additional turbine is a growth project. It's not sustainable. It's not a compliance capital requirement. So it was funded by the corporation. And showing that we have a 2-year payback, which is less than what the reserves that we have are, was pretty easy to sell. So that was one of the reasons. The second is we prefer to manage the power generation in-house rather than going to a third party. It provides us more control. It gives us more guarantee that we'll meet our production requirements if we have control over the power generation. And so that's the two-step decision for that.
And in your case, Dominic, I think it was mainly capital availability and that you wanted to invest in your business, exploring new sites and mines, right?
Yeah, correct. We went for the PPA option. Part of that is the Mandalay philosophy for how we handle cash. As I mentioned in the presentation, we pay 6% dividend on our revenue. So what that means, the sites, what they earn, 6% immediately comes off top. And then any funding, we prefer not to give any funding from a corporate. So we don't want the sites coming to us saying, look, we want to put in a project for X dollars. We expect the operations to come to us saying, look, I've got a project and it falls below the value. So I'm not actually asking for any money. We're still paying, we're still self-funding. And to be able to do that and continue with the exploration, it wasn't really the option of spending close to $2 million for the construction of this plant. And Rayme Energy were very flexible with what they did, and the PPA worked very well for us in the 2-stage system.
How much time?
Thank you. Hello. My name is Axel Schmidt. I have a question to maybe Pablo and Tom, because of the regions so different. Did you ever think about a storage system also in your system? Because you talked about increasing your renewable share, and stability of the network. Maybe Tom, en español, me interesa la idea como han pensado en un sistema de almacenaje también, como del sistema fotovoltaico en tu caso, o del sistema de eólico híbrido en el caso de Tom.
Yeah, for Toki, the only storage that we have for energy is the diesel that's in the tanks. The river, all we do is take a portion of the flow and run it through the turbines to produce energy. When there's not enough flow in the river, we produce less energy through the turbines, so we have to consume more diesel during that time. Wind is variable, but we haven't investigated anything in terms of putting any additional storage in for the renewable like the wind. We just haven't done it yet. It's a possibility, but we haven't investigated it.
Okay, thank you.
Sí, para nuestro caso está todo evaluado para diésel. Será evaluación futura que haremos en este tiempo antes de que se ponga en marcha el proyecto para tratar de evaluar, pero también tendremos que tener en cuenta que se puede modificar de alguna forma la demanda de la actividad minera para que también se adapte a la ¿cómo se llama?, a la entrega de energía que puede llegar a ser tanto renovable o diésel, para tratar de no generar acumulación. Yo creo que el gran debate que se viene en el futuro cuando se habla de disminuir los combustibles fósiles en función de combustibles, en función de energías alternativas, las RNCC, es que está en las emisiones por un lado y en las baterías por otro, o sea que son discusiones que se van a dar en un futuro seguramente.
Muchas gracias.
Yo creo que para añadir algo allí, yo creo que en ese caso, con porcentajes de renovables debajo del 50% quizás baterías todavía no son necesarios. Después yo creo que en el primer paso sí, baterías más en términos de estabilidad, más de potencia que de energía, y con un porcentaje de coste bastante pequeño, yo creo que sí se puede llegar a tener 100% renovable en una planta. Y lo interesante, yo creo que por eso también para todo el mercado eléctrico es en los sistemas híbridos de sitios aislados, al final se tiene que llevar todos los problemas que hay en un sitio. No son como camuflado como en la red donde tengo producción fotovoltaica, renovable, eólica, y al otro lado pues, convencional, y los dos están incluso con intereses muchas veces contrarios. Aquí en un sitio aislado todo tiene que funcionar juntos. Y hay una pregunta.
Hi, Daniela Ruff with Golder Associates. Thank you for the very interesting presentations. I'm just curious about the turbines that were selected. I know you probably weren't part of the turbine selection process, but you don't normally see the two-blade design. And I'm just wondering sort of your perspective on that. Have you found that it's quite noisy? Or, I mean, obviously there's a benefit of increased efficiency using that design, so you're going more for production rather than aesthetics, which is quite important for your site, obviously. The other question is, you know, in retrospect, would you have changed the design in terms of how to do the maintenance, the lowering mechanism? Would you have preferred a different style of the turbine based on your current experience?
Yeah, you're right. I wasn't involved in the decision for the turbines, so I can't comment the two-blade versus the three-blade. But the for efficiencies, for sure, you would get higher with the other, but it's a bit late for us at the moment. With respect to the maintenance, I think it's a very novel way to maintain the systems. We don't need a large crane on site. We can drop them down. The only issue is the wind constraint. If it's too high, we can't touch them, and that affects the productivity of the machine. But other than that, they're noisy, and they're big, and they're tough to maintain.
But they do the job. The other question I had, just to continue, is I understand that you're using refurbished or remodeled turbines. Is that correct? I sort of understand from previous presentations by Ram that...
Yeah, because of the high gusts and wind speeds, we had to reduce the length of the blade to manage it. That was the only change. And then I think, I'm not quite sure what the original design of the blade was, but now it's a reinforced fiberglass.
Okay.
So it's a little different.
So I guess my main question was, I've seen other presentations by Ram, and they've actually used, like, not secondhand, but kind of turbines that have then been refurbished in order to reduce the CapEx costs. Is that the case with your particular turbines?
These were purchased new.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe that they refurbished the turbines for your project, right, Dominic? No? Oh, okay. Any other questions? Okay, I just have one final question, and then we'll wrap up. We've got two excellent examples of mines in the south and one smaller operation in the north. Where else in Chile, do you see opportunities for microgrid projects for mines?
Yo creo que proyectos como el nuestro hay muchos en la tercera región. Se pueden advertir, si uno se mete en el sistema de evaluación ambiental, se encuentran todos los proyectos que hoy en día están en evaluación ambiental. Entonces, en el tamaño nuestro hay bastantes proyectos que yo creo que podrían seguir este camino.
For me, in the region of Patagonia, there's a huge potential for mineral. But the issue I think that everyone would see is the investment in infrastructure. There isn't any. You have to put in your own roads, you have to put in your own power. There's lots of people that don't want to see dams put in the region, even though we have a lot of water that would generate a lot of hydroelectric. So you have that issue as well. And the last is the region where we are, there's only 100,000 people. So you've got a skill issue for people, but the potential for additional mines in the south is very high as far as I'm concerned. There's a huge potential.
Okay, so thanks a lot for your participation and
Muchas gracias a ustedes.
Gracias.